Hello everyone and welcome to another video on our own devices. I'm Jean Messier and today we are having a look at an iron, specifically a Montgomery Ward quick lighting iron patented in 1936. Now, so far on this channel, I've really hesitated to cover common household appliances like sewing machines or irons because there are just so many different variations and brands out there that to do the subject justice would require either one really long video with tons of examples or many individual videos, turning this channel into the irons and sewing machines channel. But I think this one is interesting enough to cover in its own video because this runs on, of all things, gasoline. So let's have a closer look at this and let me show you how this works. Now, clothes irons have been around since at least the 1st century BCE, and for much of history, there were two basic types. Sadirons, which were made of solid iron or steel and had to be constantly reheated on a wood or coal-burning stove, and box irons, which had a hollow compartment for holding burning coals. And in case you're wondering, sad is an archaic Middle English word meaning solid. It has nothing to do with the enjoyment, or lack thereof, of ironing clothes. Now, some of the greatest advancements in clothes iron design were made by Mary Florence Potts of Ottumwa, Iowa, who in the 1870s patented a double-ended sadiron that could work in both directions, and a sadiron with a detachable wooden handle. The latter proved especially popular and was typically sold in sets of 3 so that 2 irons could be kept heated on the stove while the third was in use, and the handle quickly transferred to a fresh iron as needed. However, this was still a very cumbersome process, while box irons were smoky, difficult to keep burning, and often covered the clothes being ironed with a layer of soot. So, in the late 19th century, inventors came up with a variety of self-heating irons that ran on liquid fuels like alcohol, kerosene, and gasoline. Now, it's worth noting here that during this period, the term gasoline referred to what today we would call naphtha or white gas, most commonly sold as fuel for camping stoves and lanterns. Also known as light straight-run gasoline, or LSR, this is distilled directly from crude oil and has a low octane rating, meaning that for use in internal combustion engines, it had to be mixed with octane boosters or anti-knocking agents like ethanol and tetraethyl lead to prevent pre-detonation or engine knock. Of course, leaded gasoline started being phased out in the 1970s for environmental and health reasons, and while ethanol is still used as a fuel additive today, octane is mainly boosted at the refinery through a process called catalytic reforming, though that's a bit beyond the scope of this video. But if you want more of a deep dive into the science of octane rating and automotive pollution, you can check out 2 videos I wrote on the subject over on Today I Found Out, link in the description. Now, the first gasoline-fueled self-heating iron was patented in 1903 by Civil War veteran John C. Lake of Big Prairie, Ohio, where he established the highly successful Monitor Sad Iron Company. Several other companies soon entered the market, most notably the Coleman Lamp Company of Wichita, Kansas. That finally brings us to this iron, which was patented by one Chester A. Hoff on December 22, 1936, manufactured by the Akron Lamp Company of Ohio as the number 7, and sold by a mail-order retailer and department store Montgomery Ward as the number 4045. Now, self-heating irons are typically provided with a raised metal rest stand on which they could be placed when not in use, but if you forgot to use this and simply set the iron down on its face, you risk burning the clothes you were ironing or the ironing board. So Chester Hoff set about creating a self-heating iron that could be stood up vertically when not in use. And he did this by moving the fuel tank to the rear and fitting it with embossed feet to allow it to stand stably on its rear surface. Inside, the tank also features a curved inlet tube that allows fuel to continue feeding whether the iron is horizontal or vertical. Right, so the operating procedure for one of these should be fairly familiar to any of you who have used a naphtha camping stove or lantern. You first stand the iron upright, then unthread this filler cap and pour in 1/3 of a pint or 158 milliliters of fuel. And handily, both the Akron Lamp Company and Coleman sold refill cans containing exactly 1 tank full of fuel. And it's important to note here that there were 2 different versions of this iron produced, the G model for gasoline and the K model for kerosene. The required fuel was typically indicated on this cast data plate on the handle strap, but you can also tell them apart by looking at the design of the fuel nozzle, which we'll have a look at in a moment. Anyway, once the tank is filled, you replace the filler cap, unscrew this plunger, pump it 15 to 18 times to pressurize the fuel, then screw it back in. Next, you have to preheat the generator, which vaporizes the liquid fuel into a gas prior to mixing it with air. And in older self-heating irons, this was typically done with an alcohol lamp, but the instructions for this model recommend using kitchen matches, which you insert through this circular hole in the side of the iron. Finally, with the match still lit, you turn this knob counterclockwise to open up the fuel valve and the iron should ignite. And while doing this, you need to ensure that this little dial is turned all the way back to the open position. This is connected to a cleaning needle, which helps keep the fuel nozzle clear of soot. As with naphtha stoves and lanterns, the fuel pump and nozzle pricker were originally separate parts, but were fully integrated into later designs. If you want to learn more about the evolution of this technology, please check out my previous video on the Primus 71 stove, link in the description. Now, while I would love to fire this up and demonstrate it for you, unfortunately most of the seals appear to be badly deteriorated, meaning this is probably really leaky. And worse still, these had a bad reputation for suddenly flaring up and catching fire and burning the user. And indeed, in one of the testimonials I was able to find, a woman described always ironing by her back door so that she could fling the iron into the garden whenever it caught fire. So while I am a certified pyro, I think in this particular case I value my eyebrows a little bit too much. However, I can take this apart and show you some of the internal components. So we've already looked at the pump assembly, so the first step in disassembling this is to undo these two screws on the bottom of the handle strap. Now, if you have a short screwdriver, this is easy enough, but if not, you can undo these screws below the pump and under the fuel tank and just pull the whole handle fuel tank assembly away. And attached to this is our generator assembly with the fuel feed valve and the nozzle cleaning needle. If we look at the end of the generator, we can see that this nozzle has two flat sides, meaning it is intended for gasoline. Nozzles on kerosene-fueled irons had four flat sides, as you can see here. Removing the handle strap reveals a pair of lock washers, which are actually vital to the proper operation of the iron as they raise the handle strap off the top surface, allowing air to flow through this chimney. This also reveals three more screws, and if we undo these, we can remove the top of the iron itself to reveal our combustor system, which is quite sooty, indicating that this particular example saw quite a bit of use. This comprises a curved tubular mixing chamber and flame holder, and the gas generator fits loosely into this end to form a chrome carburetor. Vaporized gasoline shoots out of the generator nozzle, entraining air through the open mouth of the combustor. The air and fuel mix and ignite, and the flames emerge through these slots, heating the iron. Meanwhile, hot air emerging from this chimney creates a convection current that keeps air flowing through the system, whether the iron is horizontal or vertical. Now, at around the same time as irons like these were being developed, inventors also came up with a variety of designs powered by illuminating gas and, of course, electricity. However, kerosene and gasoline-powered irons remained popular well into the 1950s, especially in rural areas which weren't fully electrified until the 1940s, and these continued to be used all around the world in areas without reliable electrical supplies. And that, dear viewers, is a brief overview of gasoline-powered irons. I'd heard about these vaguely in the past, but as soon as I came across this example in a local thrift store, I knew I had to cover it for the channel. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you next time, another video where we'll look at yet more fascinating household appliances and other devices just like this one. Until then, I'm Jean Messi from Our Own Devices. Have a great day.